First and foremost, let me just say this. My name's Nathan Harmon, but ultimately I am so privileged and I'm honored to be here with all of you staff, because I always say it this way. When I think of EMTs and I think of police officers and I think of doctors and military, if I want to be 100% honest, educators and teachers and administrators in the school system, man, you guys are right there in the middle of all of that, because without you, our culture of this country, without you, I know firsthand how much you guys have impacted my life when it came to from teachers to the staff at my schools. I just want to say, and I get emotional on this, thank you for taking your life journey of saying, I want to be an educator, a teacher, an administrator, whatever role or position you are in the educational system. Thank you for what you're doing from the bottom of my heart, because you really are. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause. You really are the most important, if not the most important cog in this country for this next generation. Thank you for that. I mean, honestly. So, my name is Nathan Harmon, and she got it up there great. I'm excited today to get to live life with you here for a little bit, just because ultimately, I know we have the students in here right now, and I also want to say thank you, students, for what you guys have been doing today of coming here and being a part and signing up and saying, you know what, I can, I must, I will, I believe that I have a greater future ahead of me. And for all of you teachers, listen, I want you guys to understand this, that you can, with your words, you can with your love, you can with you being present in classrooms, you can absolutely play an insurmountable, unreplaceable position in students' lives, because I know you didn't sign up for it. When you signed whatever your educational contract was, first off, I know you don't get paid nearly enough what you should be being paid. That's bottom line, we know that. But you didn't like it, love it, or leave it. You didn't just sign up to be an educator. No, you signed up to be a parent. You signed up to be a trusted, caring adult. You signed up to stand in the gap in many of our students' lives that need to know that there is a safe place, a safe space, that they can have a position in all of their craziness, in all of their story, that they can have a position in their life where they can feel safe and they can feel like they can dig in and begin to try to get some traction to have a greater future. That's what you are. And I know for firsthand how much you guys as not only as educators, the teachers that I had in my middle school, the Mr. Coleheaps, the Mr. Gaines, the Miss Ballsworths that played parts of my story. When I got to high school, the Mr. Crouches, the Mr. Coomers, the teachers that played parts in my story and my journey from my little Indiana town where I'm born and raised. Currently, I live in a place called Kokomo. It's not just a Beach Boys song. I live there. But I was born and raised in a place called Marion, Indiana. And let me just say this as we get started today. The beach is better than corn. Just saying. I love Florida. I love when I get to come to Florida. A little bit about what we do now is, as I dig into kind of the story of my life and hopefully then really empower some of you guys to attack this school year. Because ultimately that's what I'm here to do, is to hopefully ignite a fire, ignite a passion, kindle something so that as you launch into this school year, I want you to understand your words don't fall on deaf ears, even when your students don't respond to you the way that you hope they would. Your students are listening even when you think they don't. My job today, when I'm all said and done and I say goodbye, is for hopefully many of you to walk through these doors saying, I can make a difference this school year in my classroom, day in and day out. And I know my job isn't for nothing, because my words matter, they count, and they carry weight in my students. Because I promise you they do. So, what we do is, I'm a speaker, if you didn't know. I travel the country, and I've been privileged over the last 3 or 4 years to speak in high schools, middle schools, conferences, speak anywhere they let me open my big mouth, really. But in the last 3 school years, we've been in last 2 school years ago and last school year, we've been over 430 schools just in the last 2 school years, from coast to coast, from Maine to Cali to Oregon and here to Florida and everywhere in between. And I started this about 4 years ago when I just wanted to start speaking in schools after some of my pitfalls and my mistakes, and it kind of took off, and I guess I was a pretty effective communicator to middle schoolers and to high schoolers and to people. So that's what we do. I started an organization called Your Life Speaks, and so it was, honestly, to be in this county, this means a lot to me because my team and I have wanted to be able to get into this county to hopefully inspire and impact people for a few years now. So this is even a surreal moment that I'm here. Yes, even you guys here in Broward County, you have people that are desperate to continue just to be a part of this community, because I promise you, these educators in this room, you guys are world changers, game changers, and I mean that with everything inside of me. So my story goes a little bit something like this. I'm born and raised in Indiana. Growing up, I come from a family of four. It was mom, dad, sister, and me. And my father, he was my icon. He was a rock star. He was the hero in my life. My father was everything to me. I looked up to him. He was that role model. He was that steady figure in my life. But what happened in my story is it was about the 5th, 6th grade, the beginning of my middle school journey. My mother and my father, they set me and my sister down. And growing up as a young man, my parents, they never really fought in front of me. Maybe I was just naive, but I thought I had a picture-perfect family. My parents never had arguments, they never had disagreements. I'm not overstating it, I'm not embellishing it. I never saw my parents have fights, and they set us down at the kitchen table. And every time that I'm in schools or any time that I'm communicating, I always talk about moments of impact. There are moments in impact in all of our lives, and we've all experienced them. Moments when situations happen, good or bad, growing up as a young person, something that impacts you in such a way, you remember every single detail about every single thing when that happened. Moments of impact. They can be positive, of winning championship or acing tests or getting married or having kids for us adults. Or they also can be negative things of maybe when divorces happen or tragedy and things happen of that nature. Moments of impact, and we all have them. For me, it happened at a young age, my first big moment of impact, when my mother and my father set me down, and my father began to talk about a divorce and a separation that would happen. And without any warning, my dad was ripped out of my life. It really rocked me and it floored me because my parents never fought in front of me. I thought growing up, the reason that my parents told me that I was never allowed to go into the bedroom is because, well, for one thing, I have one speed, and I call it squirrel. I am go. And when I was a kid, I broke everything. And so my parents were like, listen, our bedroom's off limits because we need some peace and quiet from you. I get it, kinda. But behind the bedroom door, it's where the verbal, the mental, the emotional abuse happened in my family. Behind their bedroom doors where the drugs and the alcohol happened in my family. And when I began to ask questions about the divorce, I began to figure out the truth that my parents weren't picture perfect. And I remember there was a time that I looked at my father, who used to be my role model, my icon, and I looked at him and said, I'm never going to be like you. I want to prove to you I don't need you in my life. I'm going to prove to you that I can do this on my own. But what I learned to do is what many of our students have learned to do. I learned to put on my mask. I learned to do what probably many sometimes us as adults have learned to do, to put on the fake face, to put on the fake smile, to go through the motions, and on the surface, everything looks so picture perfect, but below the surface were hurts and pains and emotions. And I went through middle school with my fake smile, acting like everything was okay, but below the surface, I was screaming, but I was silent. And that began to be a struggle of mine, because I always say it this way in high schools and middle schools: pressure busts pipes. And if social and emotional pressure isn't dealt with properly, that's when we have dangers, destruction, and disasters. And I've learned and I've experienced over the last several years of my life that pressure will find its way out, especially in young people's lives, in one of these 5 ways. For me, that pressure for me in middle school, even though I acted like it was all okay, slowly the pressure built, the social, the emotional struggles, the hurts, the pains. For some of us, thoughts of giving up happen. And we've seen that all across the nation, suicide and the mental health aspect, where certain young men and young ladies and old men and even older ladies, they're not talking about their stuff. They don't think that they can talk about their stuff. So they wear the mask and pressure begins to build. And eventually, especially with social media and how connected the world is, you hear one person talking about maybe committing suicide and then somebody else, and then slowly that voice in the back of your head, maybe this is my option too. And for me, that's exactly what happened. I battled suicidal thoughts all through middle school and high school. I battled actual failed attempts. I battled me wanting to and coming from such brokenness, pressure bust pipes. And for me, thoughts of giving up was one way that pressure came out. Another way that the pressure came out for me was self-harming. And again, I'm sure many of you as teachers and educators all across this county, you probably have students that you know have battled with self-harming, cutting and burning themselves. I talk about suicide and self-harm when I go into school systems and I do small groups or school-wide assemblies, because I didn't read books to get educated about it. I've learned and I've continued my education on an academical level now, but I talk about it because I've experienced it. I know what it was like, and I can count the scars. And when I talk to young men and to young ladies in the school about these struggles, there's a connection, and I'm able to begin to really say, listen, that's not the answer, that solves nothing, because what we need to begin to continue to do is get people to not look at the problems, but begin to look at the solutions. If we only focus on the problem, we're never going to get past the problem. And if we can inspire young men and young ladies to say, you know what, I identify, I understand that's a hurt, I know it's a pain, I know it's real, but let's keep making some steps and let's wade through the waters and get out of that. And I'm here as a trusted, caring adult. All of you here that are in this room, the educators and the teachers, yes, you're just teachers, and yes, you signed up for that, but I promise you, you are to many of your students trusted, caring adults, a safe place, a place that I promise you, that young man or that young lady that's in your classroom, they long to know that they're not invisible. And your voice carries weight. And your voice carries weight in their life, even if they don't acknowledge it. I promise you, the Mr. Cole Heaps in my life, he was my gym teacher in the 7th and 8th grade. He cared about me. He would bring me into his classroom. He would bring me into his office. He wouldn't always write me up, even though he should have written me up many of times. It wasn't always just black and white, you're in trouble. He invested in me. He poured into me. And even though in my stubbornness, I acted like I didn't care. And even though in my stubbornness, I acted up and I acted out. To this day, as I have now begun to transition into another part of my life, those words he said to me in the 7th and the 8th grade have carried such weight to me. I never forgot how he made me feel as a person who cared about me. And every one of you educators in here today, my goal is to inspire you, to hope to motivate you, and to captivate you to know that this school year isn't just a regular school year, and every school year going forward from here, that your students, each and every day, your voice matters to them. And that can be daunting. And yes, you could say, I didn't sign up for that. But listen, that's what you're into though. Your kids, your students, they need you. You're not just an educator. Maybe 20 years ago, that's how it was. The times have changed. We have a fatherless and a motherless generation from coast to coast. Every school I go to, I always ask the question, how many of you in here come from broken families? Because I come from that and I can talk to it in a powerful, hopefully profound, inspirational way to students. And every school that I go to, half the hands, 3/4 of the hands go up from broken families where mom or dad are not in their life and they're struggling because they don't really know why or where to go. You, my friends, my amazing educators that are more than just teachers, you're the lifeline of this country. Your position is to inspire, impact, and sometimes just to be a listening ear. Sometimes not saying anything is the most powerful weapon that you can have. Just to be in a room and just to listen. Nathan, I don't understand that. I don't have that training. Nathan, that's intimidating. Listen, you sometimes don't have to say a word. Just sit there and listen. And I'm not talking about 15 and 20 and 30 minute time frames. Sometimes these students just need 1 minute of your time. Just to vent. Just to express themselves. See, I dealt with those pressure bust pipes. And from middle school to high school, I dealt with suicidal thoughts and self-harming. I also dealt with this. Hurting people hurt people. We call it bullying. I like to tell the students and call it for what it really is in the high schools. It's verbal, it's mental, it's emotional, it's abuse, and I tell the students it's wrong. I don't like to use the elementary term of bullying. I know it's probably the politically correct, but hurting people hurt people, and bullying is verbal, mental, emotional abuse, and it's wrong. And at the end of the day, hurting kids who hurt people, it's because they're wearing the mask. And since they don't have a lot of self-worth and a lot of self-value, what they do is they come to school and they try to find students that they think that are weaker than them, and they try to take their worth and take their value from them. But unfortunately, we all as adults know too well, you can never take your worth and your value. Every day, those same students wake up in the morning and they feel just as empty, so they start a vicious cycle. They come to school and they try to step on more people and try to intimidate more people. I try to always encourage the young man and the young lady who's on the receiving end of being bullied. It's not that they don't like you, I promise you. They're just hurting too, and hurting people hurt people. And ultimately, if we can encourage our students not to justify the bully, it's not right, it's not okay, but the more I've learned to encourage the student that's being picked on and made fun of, listen, at the end of the day, continue to let us know about it, but the more you ignore them, I promise you they're going to find a new kid to pick on, because they're not picking on you because they don't like you. They're just trying to find anybody and everybody that will feed into their hurts, because hurting people hurt people. Pressure bust pipes, and for some of us we turn to suicide, and for some of us we turn to self-harm, some of us we turn to bullying, hurting people. I know I lived all of these through middle school and high school. And what happened when I went from my middle school to my high school, I gave up some of my good friends. Through middle school, even below the surface of, yes, some of my social and emotional struggles that I had, I still was maintaining some decent grades. I still had some good friends around me. Who you surround yourself with matters. Who you rub elbows with and speak into your life matters. And in middle school, I had some really good friends, Jared and Jordan, that even though I was struggling on the surface, they continued to help be shoulders for me to lean on. We're always better together, y'all. No matter, that's a timeless message for young and old alike. We're always better together. And for me though, from middle school to high school, I always say it this way, the biggest mistake that I ever made, I made a lot, but the biggest one, when I went from middle school to high school, Jared and Jordan, good friends that had dreams and goals and held me accountable, cared about me, were invested in me. They weren't the popular kids per se. They weren't the movers and the shakers of the school. And so as I went from the middle school to the high school, from 700 students in my middle school to 2,700 students in my high school, I needed to feel accepted by the masses. I wanted the popularity. I wanted to be part of the movers and the shakers. So what I did is I remember I walked away and I consciously made a decision to leave my good friends of Jared and Jordan. I cut them off because they weren't going to give me the image that I thought that I needed. And when I cut them off and began to find new friends and began to try to surround myself with the popular kids, the older kids, I found some. And they began to continue to entice me with drugs and with alcohol. They continued to try to get me to join the party scene. And here I was, a young man wearing a mask. And here I was, this young man, that pressure was building. And yes, drugs and alcohol, even though it started as peer pressure and me wanting to fit in, it became my new crutch. It became a new way for that pressure to find a place of release. I'll show you a picture, which is a crazy picture. This picture on the left, yeah, that's me. I started high school as a straight A student. I ended high school as a senior, being expelled 6 weeks before graduation. Drugs and alcohol consumed me. You named it, I experimented with it. You named it, I did it. Ultimately, I cared so much about maintaining images. I cared so much about the opinions of the people around me that I was willing to compromise myself. I'm all about the word compromise, because compromising, whenever it comes to drugs, to alcohol, to peer pressure, there is never a time to compromise when it comes to negative lifestyles and characteristics. Compromise will always leave you hurt and in pain. But I began to compromise in my sophomore, junior, senior year. That became me, the picture on your left. I didn't graduate. I was expelled 6 weeks before graduation. I went to the Army, not because I wanted to, because I had to. And when I went to the Army, I developed an eating disorder. I battled bulimia from the ages of 18 to 23 terribly. I battled all of these situations and all of these struggles, from suicide to self-harm to drugs to alcohol to bullying kids to being picked on to bullying kids, also eating disorders. At age 23, well, after I got kicked out of school at 18, I went to the Army for a year. Upon being kicked out of the Army, because I couldn't do that right, because drugs and alcohol, I came back to my hometown, kind of just spinning my tires in the mud, being labeled by my community as a failure, the kid that couldn't get right. You know what? I might as well just own it. I might as well just fulfill what everybody already thought about me, because there's power in the words we speak over to people. But everything changed at 23 when I began to give in to drugs and to alcohol. It was a Friday night, July 17th, 2009. A bunch of my friends were out partying. I went to the party. At the end of the party, they said, "Hey Nate, we're gonna go to the bar. Do you wanna go?" I said, "Sure, why not? I'm 23, I'm of legal age." When the bar was closing down, they said, "Nate, there's a big after party at TJ's house. Do you wanna go?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" They said, "Well, you know TJ real well, so why don't you leave a little bit early and go get the party ready?" I said, "Great idea." I got on my phone and I called my designated driver, Priscilla. Priscilla showed up to take me to the party. When she showed up, when we left, for some reason, she gave me the keys to her vehicle. And at 23 years old, when I walked up to her car, I put a case of beer bottles in the back seat, and I got into the driver's seat and we took off. When I talk about moments of impact, I vividly still today remember Priscilla, her voice, her name, her face, everything about it. She said this to me. She just said, "Tree!" And I was in a hospital. I woke up, police officers over top of me, my mother next to me. The police released me for some reason, and I don't know exactly why. But when I got into the car, the police had told my mother, "We'll be in contact with you very soon." My mother began to share what happened in my wreck. We had a tree at a high rate of speed. The case of beer bottles from the back seat flew forward. Priscilla didn't have her seatbelt on, so she flew forward too. And as they flew through the air, they hit the windshield at the same time. Within 24 hours of my wreck, my passenger, Priscilla Owens, my friend, she lost her life. You see, drugs and alcohol, I've learned to liken them to a bear cub. Bear cubs, like, rawr, bear cub, you know? They're cute, they're cuddly, they're innocent, they seem so harmless, a bear cub. But when the bear cub grows up and the grizzly bear isn't a cub and it's a full-grown grizzly bear, it won't play favorites. It won't discriminate. It will kill you. And that's a message that I've been able to carry into the schools quite frequently. But in the moment when Priscilla lost her life, crazy part of the story is 3 days after my wreck, Priscilla's family, who didn't know me, they never had met me. I'd only known Priscilla for 6 weeks before the night of the accident. They wanted me to contact them, and what do you say? "I'm sorry, forgive me." I called them scared to death. Nobody answered. I didn't want to call them back. I knew I had to, though. And when I called them back, Carolyn, the mother, and Olivia, the sister, they answered, and they said, "Nathan, before you say a word, Priscilla was sober when she left to come get you, and she's not easily influenced. She's very strong-willed, and we don't know why. We don't know why she gave you the keys that night. We don't feel that it's fair to solely blame you. And I said, no, this is my fault. And they said, absolutely, you're responsible. But Priscilla knew better. Their words, not mine. We want you to know we forgive you. You're like family to us, but we're asking you to do two things. Try to make the world a better place, and please don't let our daughter die for nothing. And I had been not a man of my word, and I had been a liar, and I had been a thief and a cheat, and you name it. You couldn't trust me as far as you could throw me into that time because my addiction consumed me. But when this family forgave me, there was one promise I promised to myself and to a family that I would never not try to keep until I gave my last dying breath. And that was to make sure that their daughter and this message that your life speaks, it screams, it shouts. What you do is what you believe. There is hope as long as there is breath in our lungs. We are better together. Would never not go on deaf ears. The family forgave me, Indiana didn't. There's consequences for your choices. I was sentenced at 23 years old to 15 years in prison. When I went to prison, though, I had to realize something. I was notorious, and I think it's a characteristic that some of us have been, even not just me, but it's a habit that the young people and old people like that we, if we're not careful, we walk into. You see, I was allowing things that I had no control over to control me for so long. I used to allow things that I had no say-so, no input, no influence over to control me. I didn't ask for my parents to get divorced when I was 12 years old. I had no control and no say over it. But I sure blamed him not being in my life for everything. I blamed him when I skipped school. I blamed him when I tried drugs. I blamed him for my attitude. I blamed him for everything. And at 23 years old, I had this moment of clarity and I had this understanding. And even though I was faced with 15 years in prison, I realized something, that I was blaming things that I had no control over to have control over me. My dad didn't make me do any of those things. I was the one that decided to skip school. I was the one that decided to have an attitude. I was the one that decided to do drugs and alcohol. And so what I learned 10 years ago, because this was 10 years ago, I've now been sober for 10 years and we're going after this thing. But what I learned 10 years ago was to take control of my life. And what I decided to do 10 years ago was to do all in my power to every person that I come in contact with, to take control of their life and to understand your voice. Here as teachers today, my message to you, your voice, it speaks, it screams, it shouts. Your life matters. What you say, what you do, how you impact and inspire and teach and every single moment with these students, you are leaving your fingerprints on them. And truthfully, we all have the ability to leave our fingerprints and affect and change history. There are the Mr. Colheaps, the Mr. Burnsworths, and the Mrs. Canes that spoke into my life. They had no idea at the time the words that they would say to me would be words that I would resonate on in prison for years, about not giving up and taking control of our lives and speaking life to me, that today are still, I'm carrying that exact same message today because of words they spoke over to me. Your words matter, guys. Who you are, you're more than an educator. You're a world changer. Who you are, you're more than just a teacher. You're a lifesaver. Who you are, you're more than just a man or a woman or a person in this community. You literally are in a position, and your purpose in life, you've been put in this position for a reason. Yes, your educational dreams, and yes, this job happened and maybe that job didn't, but this school year, right now where you're at, you are in a position and a gatekeeper in young people's lives, and I promise you, your voice matters. I didn't serve 15 years in prison. I began to take control of my life. I live with 5 habits in my heart and my mind now. There are 5 pillars that have helped change my life. I've learned to be accountable and transparent. Transparency and accountability. You won't see your blind spots. You never see your blind spots. We're better together. We need each other. I always encourage people to make sure they have that one person that can hold them accountable. That one person that they can be transparent with. I don't tell people to air out their mail to anybody and everybody. That's not wise. But we all have those people, somebody that we can get real and raw with. And real knows real. And sometimes you'll hear people say, Nathan, I just don't have anybody. That's just a notorious response from a student. Nathan, I don't have nobody. And I say this to them, let me ask it this way. Do you have somebody, but that somebody that you have, you don't want to talk to? And they're like, yeah. You know why? Because that person will hold them accountable, and they don't want to be held accountable. So we've always, every one of us, young and old alike, we all have somebody that we can be transparent to that will hold us accountable. Because I always say it this way, you have to have self-belief, but you can't do it by yourself. You got to believe in yourself, but you can't do this by yourself. We're better together. So in the middle of when my back was against the wall and I was blaming my father, I took ownership and I began to realize my circumstances don't dictate my reality. I'm not a product of my environment. I'm a product of what I do today. My past is never bigger than my future. I am what I do. And so I took ownership. I began to live with these 5 principles: accountability and transparency. I had to talk about my stuff. I had to find people that I could talk about my stuff. To all of you in here, there will be students in your school this year. There will be friends, coworkers, family. You need to understand that you should hopefully be willing to be a trusted, caring friend and an adult, or that you can be that person that can help hold people accountable. That one student, that one friend. We're better together. Accountability and transparency. The next 2 go together too. Hard work and good choices. Hard work works. Make good choices. Good things happen. I live by those 4. Accountability, transparency, work hard, make good choices. Hard work works. Make good choices. Good things happen. And then the 5th one, value people. I used to only value people if I thought I could get something from them. That's normal for most of us. I realized that I was super selfish when I had this time to decompress and to reflect on my life. Too often, we value people and we put a value on them if we think they will benefit us socially, emotionally, positionally, statusly, financially. I realized I wanted to stop putting my value system on people, what I could get from you, but I wanted to be a person that learned to value people just because you're you, and you have a story, and you have your own journey, and you have your own life. And the more I learned to value people and not be so egocentric around myself, but to know that we're better together. How could I be somebody who walks into a room and tries to add value to the people around me? Those 5 principles, I call them the 5. Accountability, transparency, hard work, good choices, and valuing people have been 5 pillars in my life that have allowed me over the last 10 years of my life to gain the traction and to have some momentum. And I've experienced 10 years of sobriety, 10 years of without having suicidal thoughts, 10 years of overcoming my eating disorder, 10 years, you name it, that these 5 characteristics have helped change my life. And so, to all of you, I promise you, your voice, this school year, your voice matters. You know too well. You're in the thick of it. We have young men and young ladies who battle with suicidal thoughts and self-harming. A listening ear. Being a listening ear. Being somebody that also is invested to look to and fro to try to find those people. Not to let them just go by the wayside. The same message I carry to the students. Random acts of kindness. I tell the students all the time, if you see somebody sitting alone by themselves, be that person that has a random act of kindness. Be that person that's willing to step up, to speak out, to get invested in their life. You would never know how much, hey, how are you? I care about you matters, because we take for granted sometimes that the people around us have the same mentality as we do. We have no idea their story at home. So, when I got released 11 years early, I didn't serve 15 years, I got released 11 years early, and that was in 2013. Why? Well, I always say it this way, hard work works, make good choices, great things happen. Make good choices. Good choices will always position you in life to win. I promise you. Make good choices. Good choices will always position you in life to win. It's simple as that. Make good choices. Great things happen. If I could continue to make that a habit in my heart, my mind, life is good. So, when I first started my prison sentence, when I was 23, I literally wrote the words, "Change the world," and I slapped it and I put it on my prison wall. 10 years later, my wife and my kids, right there. Yeah, I know. I always tell everybody, my wife is hot and I married up, for real. I don't deserve her. Her name's Alexa. She's amazing. She's my rock star. She's my teammate in this, man. She's actually getting rained on the beach right now, but she loves it because sand is better than corn, I promise you. Regardless if it's sand and rain, we don't care, right? Last year we were here and it was cold to you guys. You guys were all in like parkas, and me and my wife and my kids were on the beach like, this is amazing. And everyone else is like walking around shivering. I'm like, what is this? No. But still today, 10 years later, my wife and my kids, every single morning, we see "Change the World" still on my bathroom mirror. Every single day, those words that I wrote 10 years ago are still on my bathroom mirror. And every day, I am making a conscious decision, say, how can I make choices and decisions today to better my life? My challenge to even all of you here, what's your why? Why do you do what you do? When you went to school to get your degree, and when you found yourself as an educator, for many of you, I bet you had a passion. There was some deep desire down inside of you, the essence of your life, of wanting to make some kind of a difference. There was some reason that you decided to go down this mission field. So my challenge to all of you, so some of you, maybe it's none of you, but to make sure your why hasn't grown dim, and your why of understanding you're not just a teacher, you're a paramount piece in this country that's shaping the culture of our nation, that these students need you. What's your why? And maybe for some of you, it's like a prick in the heart. Like, who's this dude with a man bun that's been an idiot his whole life asking me my why? I don't care. Because your kids need you. A question for some of you to ponder tonight. What was your why? Who's the longest educator in here? Where you at? Raise your hand. Who's the longest educator in here? Where are you at? How many years? 31. Who beats 31? 35. Going 35. Who beats 35? Oh, what do we got? How many years? 36. Ooh, 36. Anybody beat 36? Yeah. Where's my youngest educator? Who's in like year 1? Year 2? Who's the youngest? How many? No? Who's been doing it the least amount of time? I mean, who's been doing it 3 years? Anybody less than 3, 4, 5? We got some seasoned vets up in this place. Y'all been educating since I was a kid. 5 years? Yeah, no, thank you, right? That's. And all of you in between. Listen to me, guys. Honestly, not aggressively, not me pointing any fingers, but an honest question that I hope some of you tonight ponder. When you began educating, X however many years ago that was, to where you're at today, have you lost your fire? Have you lost your passion? And if you have, identify it, recognize it, find your accountable partner that you can talk to about it, and begin to say, you know what? Let me tap back in to my why, because our whys matter. You guys are trusted, caring adults that these kids need. You are co-workers, you're a family, you're a team, and we're better together. You matter. Your why matters. These kids' lives, like it, love it, or leave it. These kids' lives, one way or another, are dependent on your why. They need you in the game. We have Mr. Colheap, when he had taken time to invest into my life. He didn't see me for what I was doing, which was so wrong, only. He also was willing to try to spark a seed of life of my future and inspire me, and had taken time. I ran into him a few years ago, literally 15 years later. He hugged me, I cried. I said, Mr. Colheap, you have no idea. The words you shared to me 15 years ago have been words that I've carried, and we saved thousands of lives from suicide and self-harm and drug addiction because of your words. And I say that with authority because I know that these talks that we've been in schools, we've got thousands of messages, not even overstating that, from students saying, that talk changed me. That talk, I'm graduating because of that assembly, that speech you gave, that talk you gave me. And I wouldn't be where I'm at today without all the teachers and the educators who poured into my life today. And so from my mouth to all of your ears, thank you for who you are, for what you do, and for being willing to live a life of sacrifice. Because I know you don't get paid what you deserve. I promise you, you know that more than anything. But you are saving and impacting students' lives all across this county and this district. So thank you so much. Give yourself a big round of applause again, seriously. And in closing, I know Natalie had walked around and had handed out cards to all of you. Hopefully, if not, Natalie, she's my event coordinator in schools. We would love, selfishly, to come to your school. Just honestly. Contact us, email us, bug your administrator. These talks work. I'm privileged to be a part of your community. I'm privileged to be a part of this whole initiative of what you guys do here at the JA. Junior Achievement, did I say that right? I have so many acronyms running through my head all the time. I'm like, don't say the wrong thing, Nathan. But even if I do, I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable in my own skin. Where your life speaks, I'm Nathan Harmon. Thank you guys so much.